health and comfort considerations, and now that we are having hotter summer seasons, those considerations are creeping into the summer as well. Welcome everyone joining us, everyone on Facebook. We are going to get started here shortly. Thanks for joining us today. Hey everyone, thanks for joining. We'll get everything started here in just a bit. All right, we have quite a few people registered for today, so I do want to give it another minute. I know I'm late to a lot of stuff, so I want to be kind of forgiving, but thank you to everyone who's here in a very timely manner. It's appreciated. So hopefully you don't mind if we hang out just for a little bit longer and wait for folks to join us. Welcome. We'll get started here in just a bit for those who are watching live on Facebook and just now joining us. Heather, what are you excited about that's fresh at the farmers markets right now? Any favorite veggies? Any oddballs?
So kaleettes are adorably cute as they sound. And they're at the market right now, and they're just like little cute, adorable little baby kales. And it's like the red, the purple green variety. So they're just really good looking. And now's the time of year that is just like saute any greens. And right now it's like we have the winter ones and the spring ones are coming, which is exciting.
Yeah, that is nice. Oh, I want to get some kaleettes and put googly eyes on them before I saute them.
Yeah.
I have a mental image of them going, no.
Don't saute me.
Yes. All right, well, I think I'll get the ball rolling on this. Welcome everyone, thank you for joining. My name is Wing. I work for the city of Portland, which coordinates the Fix Affairs. I'm one of two coordinators of the events. Normally we're in-person events about 3 times a year, huge events providing community resources, including fixing repair and home repair, appliance repair, but then also health, utility savings, growing your own food, which, we have some related content around that today. Also some home cooking and healthful eating. So we're bringing you similar content to what we'd have in person right into your homes, online through Fix a Fair at Home. Today we have Heather from Montavilla Farmers Market. Thank you for joining us today, Heather. It's so good to see you again. Take it away.
Wing, thank you so much for having us back for another year of Fixin to Cook. Hello out there. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is our second edition of Fixin to Cook Soup. If you missed us last week, Elsie from Creole Me Up cooked a soup, and that's archived on our website. Today, we had a couple more guest chefs join us in the Cook First kitchen, and they're going to share a couple of different methods on preparing soup. It's soup season, right? The spring rains have joined us. So I know I've been cooking soup each and every week. And so hopefully there's a couple new ideas for you out there, and recipes. I know in the chat, we just dropped the link to Cook First peak season recipe site. So please pop over there year round whenever you need inspiration to cook with what's in season. And Wing is going to roll the videos, and then we'll be back for live Q&A after. So we'll see you and talk to you soon. Thanks for being here.
Hey, I'm Allie from Montavilla Farmers Market, and I wanted to give you a little rundown of our Double Up Food Bucks benefit with your SNAP card. So if you come to the market, you can take out your SNAP money or EBT cash, and you'll get tokens. So you'll receive your tokens, and you can use those at the market. And we'll also match up to $20 every market, once per market. And we'll give you these little cards that you can use, and this is called Double Up Food Bucks. And you can use these Double Up Food Bucks to buy fruits, vegetables, mushrooms, beans, nothing that's processed, or no hot food or alcohol, but any fresh foods you can use these to buy that with. There are multiple markets around the city and the state that you can use your benefits. So if you want to find out more about the other markets or other ways that you can use your SNAP benefits, visit doubleuporegon.org and you can find all the information there.
All right, we are so excited today to bring you Cook First plus Montavilla Farmers Market have teamed up for the Fix-It Fair, and today is Fixing to Cook soup. And we're starting out with a wonderful vegetable lentil soup that Montavilla Farmers Market Assistant Manager Allie Neary is here to share with you all. Welcome, Allie.
Okay, so today we are making a vegetable lentil soup. I always start this with, well, I guess the ingredients that I use for this are onions, carrots, potatoes. You can use celery. I choose to use celeriac because it gives it a little heartier texture. Today I'm using leeks because those are nice and seasonal right now. And of course some lentils and broth. And today I'm using chicken broth because that's what I had on hand. But you can use a vegetable broth. You can use this from a bouillon cube or making your own at home. And then a key ingredient is a Parmesan rind. If you eat cheese, this is a great addition to the soup. And finally, garlic. So I always start with the onions first, and today I'm going to do onions and leeks together at the same time. I'm going to go over here and turn on the induction burner. And just put a little bit of oil, a couple of tablespoons of your cooking oil in the pan. And let that heat up for a second. And the nice thing about this soup is it's pretty rustic and chunky, so it doesn't really matter how you chop your vegetables. As long as everything is like relatively the same size, it'll kind of cook consistently. So it doesn't require a lot of precision, which is great for me. So I'm going to throw in my onions and leeks. And you want to let these cook down for, I let them cook for about 5 minutes before I add anything else to it. So I let them get nice and soft. So just giving this a stir every once in a while to make sure you're not burning anything. And one important step is to season at different stages. So I always like to add some salt and pepper to the onions just by themselves, just to make sure that everything is getting a little seasoning. And so it looks about time to add the next ingredients. So next I like to add the carrots and celeriac together because they cook about at the same rate. So I'm gonna add those back in. And give that a little stir. And these ones we aren't going to cook as long as we let the onions cook. It's just to let them soften up a little bit and kind of get a little seasoned before we add the broth in. I always add my potatoes last because even though they are hearty and firm, they do cook a little faster, and I don't like mushy potatoes, so I throw those in last. And then another important step is to soak your lentils ahead of time. Even if you forget to do it and you just start soaking them when you start chopping everything, it's still better to let them absorb a little bit of the water so that they don't absorb all the broth in your soup. So I had these soaking for about probably 3 hours, and I would say that's about as long as I would soak them because you can see they're already starting to split. If you like more of like a split pea type style, softer soup, then you can totally soak them longer and let them cook longer too. I kind of like when they still have some firm texture to them, so I don't let them soak too long. And again, I'm just going to throw a little bit more seasoning on this layer with the carrots and the celeriac. So I like to use green lentils in my lentil soup. They're a little bit bigger than red lentils, and they have a little bit firmer of a texture. If you like more of a softer soup and more like a split pea type style or like pureed soup, the red lentils are really great, and they will split a lot faster and get mushy faster. So just keep that in mind if you're going to use those to adjust your cooking time, or if that's what you're going for, just throw them in and let them go. So this is cooking down a little bit and getting nice and brown on the bottom without burning. So it's time to add the rest of the ingredients. So I'll throw in the potatoes and the lentils. And then finally I'm going to add in the broth right on top of that. I'm not going to let the potatoes cook in the pan with the other veggies because, like I said, I don't want them to get too mushy. I want them to still have some texture. And like I said before, you can use any kind of broth that you have on hand, or if you want to make your own. Today I'm using chicken broth. Has a little bit more flavor, which is nice too. The way my grandma traditionally cooks this recipe, she doesn't use any kind of broth at all, so that's also an option. She just uses water, and then at the end makes sure to throw in a lot of Parmesan and parsley to kind of give it some more flavor. So that's how I grew up eating the soup, and it's also delicious. I like to add broth because I like a little bit more seasoning and a little bit more salt. So now that all the ingredients are in, forgot the Parmesan. Finally, I'm going to add in the Parmesan rind, and this isn't a necessary step, but it does add a lot of flavor and a little bit of creaminess to it. At the end of, when the soup is done cooking, you're going to pull the Parmesan rind out because the end will kind of be like a gooey texture. You don't necessarily need to eat that. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that in and just let it cook with your soup the entire time. And then here, just add a little bit more salt and pepper. And we'll just let this cook on low. I don't really want the soup to boil because then the veggies kind of split apart and get a little too soft. So I'm just going to lower the temperature a little bit and let it cook for 45 minutes to an hour. And you can test either the lentil or the potato or both. You want the lentils to be cooked and soft, but also still retaining their shape and form. And the potato should be cooked through, but still be nice and firm also. So today I was using a yellow potato. These are a little bit small, so it just kind of makes chopping a little bit more tedious. You can use a russet or a larger golden potato. These are what I had on hand today. I do prefer the yellow potatoes to the russet. Just the texture is a little bit better. I usually save a russet if I'm blending. So if I'm blending the soup, then I'll use a russet just as easily. So right now I'm preparing the garlic and the parsley. These will be the final touches to go into the soup. Just giving this parsley a nice fine chop. The way that I put my garlic in the soup might be a little bit different than what you do at home usually. I will add the garlic in at the very last minute when the soup is almost done cooking. So I'll cook the garlic in a little bit of oil, about 2 tablespoons of oil in a pan on a really low heat, because you don't want the garlic to brown or burn. You just want it to release the aromatics so that you get that nice flavor and smell from your soup. And once the garlic is cooked and it's just like sizzling a little bit, not brown yet, I'll throw that right on top of the soup and top it off with some parsley, stir it all up, and that's it. Okay, so now I'm going to get the garlic ready to add into the soup. So I have the pan heat on a low setting, and I'm just going to add a couple tablespoons of oil to the pan. And let that heat up for just a second. You don't want it to get too hot for the garlic, because again, you don't want it to burn. It'll kind of ruin the smell and the taste. It changes very quickly. So I'm just going to add the garlic to the pan. And you can hear it sizzle a little bit, and that's like exactly what you want. You don't want it like splattering oil at you and burning you. We're just going to let this cook for a minute here until you can just smell the garlic. And that's what you want for the last touch of your soup. Okay, so the soup is just about finished. The vegetables are cooked through, and the texture is still really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and add the garlic and the oil just right on top. Make sure you get all of that goodness in there. And I'm going to go ahead and throw all this parsley right on top too. And you want to throw this last so that it doesn't lose all of its flavor cooking in the soup. You can also add a little bit on top of each bowl if you're going to let the soup sit in your fridge for a few days. Just add some fresh parsley or whatever herbs you like right on top when you're cooking your bowl. And the last step is to add some Parmesan if that's what you'd like to do. I'll also add this onto each bowl, but it's nice to just kind of give a nice coating for the whole soup to make sure you get enough in there. All right, now everything's mixed together. I'm just gonna throw a little bit in my bowl, get some nice broth in there. And I am gonna top it off with a little bit more cheese. And let's try it. Very good.
All right, welcome everyone. We are here in the beautiful Cook Shop kitchen again this year for Fix-It Fair, and we're super excited to make just a wholesome and hearty, just like a classic minestrone soup. So the first step actually happened last night. I soaked the beans that I'm going to use because there aren't a lot of rules with minestrone soup, but I would say you want the goodness of beans to be in there. It's otherwise very much meant to be a soup that helps you like clean out the refrigerator and use whatever you've got on hand and change it with the seasons. But my beans soaked overnight, and so I've got those set aside. And then today, what I want to do to take the first step is to saute my onion, carrot, and celery, just really nice and low and slow. I'm going to turn on my burner to a low heat. We've got our induction burner, so I'm going to get the olive oil right in the pan. Maybe like 2 tablespoons of olive oil. If you're following along on the recipe, or you want to pop over to Cook First, under our seasonal recipes, you can find this whole recipe written down. But I've got my oil in the pan, And I'll let that heat up for just a moment and get my chopped onion and chopped celery. I already had ready to go. Oh, and I've got one more carrot to chop because I want to show you. I'm going to throw in my chopped carrot. But with this last one, what I do is I like to cut my carrots just in what's called an oblique slice. I'm kind of rotating the knife and rotating the carrot, and I'm getting just like inconsistent, kind of chunky and smaller and triangular shapes. That's just how I like my carrots to be in my soup. So that's a style that I've often started cutting them in. And it just gives you some like irregular shapes here, some smaller, some bigger. So they'll cook a little bit differently, but they'll all get done in the end. So I've got those 3 ingredients in my pan just for a nice long saute. All right, so we have got a classic start to our soup going. Just onions, celery, and carrots sauteed low and slow. They've spent about 10 minutes in here. You could continue to go a lot longer. The onions are starting to get translucent and a little bit browned, but that will work to be ready for our next step, which is getting the other aromatics into our soup. So I've got 2 bay leaves. I think an important part of my cooking is knowing what herbs are around my neighborhood. So I know where to find fresh bay leaves. I know where a bay tree is. And I do something a little bit particular. I accordion fold my bay leaf, and that's just kind of cracking it open and starting to get the oils in the leaf out. And I'm going to make an open spot in my pot, throw those bay leaves in the bottom. I also know that my neighbor has got a beautiful thyme plant. So I've got 4 sprigs of thyme right here is what I'm using today. Throwing those in the middle, and I'm folding the hot vegetables on top of them. So they've got their little blanket of onion, celery, and carrot. And they're starting to release their oils. In about a minute or 2 at most, I'll be able to smell the bay leaf. The bay leaf first, because it went in there. And now I can smell the thyme. And then I'm going to throw the garlic in. This is another quick add to our saute. Stir it in with the hot vegetables. And again, in about a minute, maybe less than a minute with the garlic, when I can smell the garlic, it's time to throw this saute in the crock pot with the rest of my ingredients. We're doing a simple crock pot recipe today. It's something you could convert to stovetop. But the first addition to the bottom of my crock pot are my veggies and my herbs, sauteed in olive oil, are going in the bottom of the crock. All right, and then through the magic of television, my crock pot is now ready and centered. I've added my saute, and now it's truly most of the other ingredients are going in. So I've got my soaked beans, which are a wonderful winter find at the farmer's market.
What variety of bean is that?
This is an orca bean. I've also made this recipe with Jacob's cattle bean or Rockwell are pretty common. in the Pacific Northwest. That's one that our farmers are growing. Any white bean will do. I haven't made this soup with a chickpea, but I think that that would be really wonderful, mostly because I love chickpeas. But a slow cooker bean just becomes really beautiful and creamy and delicious. And it, when some of the beans fall apart, it adds to the flavor and the texture of the broth. So like I said, not a whole lot of rules. On the recipe, you can see some suggestions for how to make this super seasonal. It's winter right now, so I've got a can of diced tomatoes that I'm gonna add, but in the peak of summertime, you definitely want to use 4 or 5 beautiful, ripe, fresh tomatoes diced up. I had some broccoli left over in the refrigerator, and this is just the broccoli stem. I peeled it and chopped it into little chunks about the same size as my carrot. Remember, I'm using up what I've got in the refrigerator, so broccoli stems are going in there. I'm gonna do some salt and pepper because I did not add that. You know what, I'm gonna hold off on the salt because what I'm using today for my broth is actually a bouillon, and you could use a vegetable broth or a chicken broth, or I like to do a beef bouillon broth with minestrone. So I'm gonna hold off on the salt because the bouillon has got salt in it. I'm gonna do 6 cups of water. Try to get the bouillon that's stuck to my spoon off of my spoon and into the pot. I'm definitely gonna give it a little stir to break up that bouillon. I love fresh ground black pepper, so I am gonna put pepper in at this time, so it's a part of the long slow cooker cook. And then this is going to, all of those ingredients are now in the crock. This is gonna go for about 5.5 hours on high in a slow cooker. We're gonna let all of these delicious ingredients mingle. We're gonna let those beans get cooked and plump, and then we'll come back for the final step. The last half hour, we'll add chopped kale, and then at the very end, I've already pre-cooked my pasta. I'll throw in some cooked pasta and talk about what else you might like to include in your minestrone, but we've got those ingredients in the crock for about 5.5 hours until the beans get tender. All right, it has been 5.5 hours on high that my slow cooker has been cooking. I tested a bean. It's got a nice cooked doneness to it. It's not totally falling apart. Some of the beans are still intact. So I'm gonna go ahead and just like really quickly rough chop the kale that I have. And that's gonna go in the soup just long enough to get wilted. Nice and steam the soup. Fold in the kale. And what we're doing is we're just gonna get that kale nice and mixed in there, just so it wilts, and we'll let the whole crock cook for like 20 more minutes till we add our final ingredients. All right, the very last thing, once we've let that kale get nice and wilted, is I have pre-cooked my pasta. I haven't had good luck with like the right timing for throwing it in the soup. I'm sure recipes are out there, but I prefer to just pre-cook it to al dente because it will be sitting in the hot soup. And I make big batches, so there are leftovers, and each time I'm heating it to serve a meal, it's gonna cook the pasta a little bit more. The pasta will continue to expand. So I cooked this pasta according to the ingredients al dente, and I like
or my minestrone, or for soups in general, I like a shell-shaped pasta, something that's got a little scoop to it, because the small cut vegetables are going to end up like inside of the pasta, and I love those bites of the pasta that's got like the carrot and the celery, maybe even a bean has tucked in. So the last thing I'm going to do is add my cooked pasta and give it a really nice good stir. All right, so here it is, my finished minestrone soup. Don't want to spill any broth. Show it to you. But I do want to talk about, I made some notes on the recipe that you can find at cookfirst.org under the seasonal recipes page. For fall and winter, you could absolutely include a butternut squash or celery root, or even turnips or parsnips at the same time that the rest of the vegetables go into the slow cooker for that first 5.5 hours. In the summertime, I mentioned using fresh tomatoes. You can also use chopped green beans when the veggies go in the slow cooker, and even try adding some chopped zucchini. That's something we tend to have an abundance of, right, in the summertime. Add some chopped zucchini at the end when you add your greens. So we're lucky to live in a place where year-round you'll get the kales and the hardy greens, but during summertime you can also add summer squash, zucchini into the mix. And then for a meat option, I used beef broth in my soup today, but you could omit that, of course, and make this vegetarian and vegan. Or you could include, I've made small meatballs that I pre-cook in the oven and I add to the soup at the end. Or you could slice up some sausage. I'd probably do that same like oblique cut where I'm kind of rotating my knife so there's some bigger and smaller chunks of a cooked sausage, and add that at the end. That'll add a lot of flavor if you want to add meat to this dish. But this is a wonderful hearty soup. Make sure you try beans at the farmer's market. I feel like that's one of those undervalued winter seasonal finds that you want to try from your farmers. You can use your Double Up food bucks to purchase those, which is nice. And I'm hungry, so I'm going to have a little bite of my soup. It's perfect.
Heather, I'll let you take it away.
All right. Yeah, it's been a whole year since I got to see myself on film cooking, so that was fun. We're here for Q&A. If you've got any questions, of course, about using SNAP at the farmer's market and Double Up food bucks, or any questions about the recipes, or maybe anything you'd want to share with us that we could say aloud, you could drop that into the chat. A couple things that I remember from filming this with Allie. I really loved that she spoke about how each woman in her family makes a lentil soup in a slightly different way. So her grandmother not using broth, but adding lots of Parmesan and parsley at the end. And her sister likes smooth red lentils. So that's how she prepares it. So each person in the family has their own variation of a lentil soup recipe that they feed one another when they get together. And the tip about sauteing garlic at the very end to keep that garlic flavor. And we've got a question in the chat about local farmers growing lentils. It is a food that can grow, from what I understand, in the more eastern parts of Washington and Oregon. I do not know of any of our immediate the farmers that show up at the farmers market growing lentils. If anyone out there does know, could point us in the direction of a farmer growing and selling lentils, we could share that out loud with everyone. Because the farmer's market would be a great place to pick them up. But I most often shop at my local food co-op, is the Alberta Co-op, and they've got a variety of different lentils that you can buy in bulk. So they've got red lentils, they've got petite French green lentils, and it's nice to try different kinds. Someone else is asking, about farmers growing dry beans. And yes, dried beans are becoming a more popular crop for farmers to grow. As I mentioned in the video, it's a little bit of one of those undiscovered finds at the farmers market, but we have farmers growing a great variety of beans, like black beans and white beans that you'll recognize from maybe the supermarket or canned goods. But also regional beans and heirloom beans that are adapted to our region. And those are the orca beans that I put in my minestrone soup. And so you can head to a number of the area farmers markets in wintertime and find farmers selling dried beans. And the thing about buying beans at the farmers market, especially compared to a grocery store, is the freshness. You're going to be purchasing this year's crop of beans more than likely. And I understand that in the bulk section of a grocery store, you're getting beans that have been around for quite a while. So fresh beans will cook faster. It's something you might want to know to adjust your time when you're cooking with beans, and you'll get more unique and beautiful and interesting varieties. So it's something you may want to try out there. And Double Up food bucks are eligible, so you can use your Oregon Trail benefits to buy beans. Another outlet for local farmers growing beans would be the CSA Coalition. We've got a Pacific Northwest CSA Coalition. There's some farmers growing beans who do it through that subscription model where you're contributing to the farm by paying upfront for what they're going to grow for you that season. So learning about what local beans are growing are pretty special. There's a lot of beans that grow well here in our area. Drop some more questions. Let me know if there's any questions coming in on Facebook because I can't see Facebook. I'll share a couple more things. I jotted a note to myself when Allie was talking about, so I'll go backwards. I'll make a big batch of soup. And Allie mentioned the parsley going in at the end of her lentil soup and doing that, portioning it with the bowls. And I think that's a really smart tip. If all the parsley goes into the soup, it'll become mixed in the soup, which is perfectly fine. But if you want that fresh, bright parsley flavor and you're saving a big batch of soup, you'll want to add a little chopped handful, the following day when you're eating the leftovers and serving it. Add those fresh, tender greens at the end, where a kale or a chard, a heartier green, I'll throw it into the soup and it'll keep getting rewarmed, but it will taste just about the same. I didn't mention something I didn't show in my video, and I may or may not have done when I ate the soup, was bonus points if when you are throwing in your fresh herbs like the bay leaves and the thyme, if you can kind of jot down a note to yourself of how many bay leaves or sprigs of thyme are floating around in there. You'll want to pull them out when you're done cooking. You don't necessarily want to eat them. You certainly could eat a bay leaf or the stem of a sprig of thyme, and it's not going to hurt you. But sometimes I know that there's 6 sprigs of thyme I've got to fish around for in my soup and try to knock off the leaves and pull the sprigs out when I'm finished cooking. And in our chat, a participant dropped in the Pacific Northwest CSA Coalition website as a resource But throughout the winter, we've got 11 farmers markets in the area that have winter dates. So there's plenty of in-person shopping to do or investing with your farmers in a CSA. It's a wonderful way to get fresh produce. I feel free to drop more questions in the chat, but I'll just share a couple more things. Our next, this Fixin to Cook series, this is the second of 4 sessions, lessons that we're sharing this year. And so the next one is actually coming up next Thursday on March 10th, is Fixin to Cook sauces. So we've got a new theme of sauces and some new guest chefs to share with you next week. And we've got a question about buying fresh bay leaves. Honestly, the only place that I've seen fresh bay leaves for sale is at the farmer's market. It isn't something I've seen in a grocer, but farmers will have them at the market with little bundles of other herbs. So I've seen this at the PSU farmers market and also the Montavilla farmers market. There's some farmers who bring fresh herbs and will show up with bay leaves. And then it might just be, I always think it's worth it to peek around your neighborhood, see what on your route where there might be a bay tree. Good reason to meet your neighbor is to help them maybe consume some herbs that they wouldn't otherwise.
Heather, maybe I missed it. Did you address the question, what about batch cooking and freezing for later? Sorry if you did cover that. Yeah.
No, I did not. It is very hard for me to look at the questions and answer them. So thank you, Wing. So batch cooking and freezing for later, absolutely. I do this all the time. My biggest recommendation is labeling and dating the containers so that you know what they are in the future. But we make a lot of big batches of soup and stew at our home and freeze it. We have little freezer containers. You can also do it in mason jars. You just want to make sure you leave the head space. So when it freezes, it will expand a little bit and you don't want any explosions. But both of these soups would work that we made today. And even Elsie's soup, I actually froze a little portion of it, would work well for freezing. I'm trying to think if there's anything in a soup that would make it less desirable for freezing. And the noodles, maybe, like the pasta is going to get pretty soft and mushy, and I think that would be fine in a minestrone, but that might be something I would avoid freezing if you particularly knew you didn't like that. Like Allie mentioned, knowing that she doesn't like when potatoes get mushy on her in a soup. So batch cooking and freezing for later, always a good idea. I also have some friends and we'll do a soup share or a soup swap. And maybe that's staggered over different weeks, or I tend to give away soup when I know that I've got too much of it, but we just eat quite a bit of soup in my house. Yeah, that's what I can think for sharing my tips of freezing. Really labeling them is so important, and I'm very bad at it. So I would encourage you all to do that. Sometimes we just open up a freezer soup and we eat it and we're not exactly sure what it is or where we cooked it, but it's soup. So it'll work. And then it's nice to have the variation. I'm someone who I will make a batch of borscht and I will eat it for the entire week, and that doesn't really bother me. But if you want more of a rotation in what you're preparing each day, I try to not eat the same soup twice in one day, but I also sometimes have something for lunch and then for dinner. But freezing is a great way to just like feed your future self when you know you're really busy and you won't be able to prepare something from scratch if you've already got it in the freezer. That's wonderful. And then these recipes are available online if you want the written version at cookfirstpdx.com. pdx.org. And that got dropped in the chat if you want to click the link, or know that you could go to cookfirstpdx.org, and then there's a pull down menu, and it's the peak season recipes is where you would find an ongoing list of seasonal recipes that we're constantly adding new stuff year round. So there's always something new to celebrate that's at the height of season, with our local growers.
It's a really lovely web page, actually. Can I screen share it? Do you mind?
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
It really
just
looks
so folks
so good.
can see how to get there.
Yeah. Does that look good? Are you seeing it?
Yeah, so there's our peak season recipe page. It's got a picture of the dish, and then a link to the videos, which we just saw, or a PDF pops up with each of the recipes. And that's an ongoing project that started during the pandemic, just as a resource for folks to be inspired to be home cooking more often. So there is now like 2 years worth of recipes, and we're going to keep it going. Lots of guest chefs have joined us. You'll see vendors' names from the farmers markets, their businesses that you might recognize have contributed recipes. And there's a pull down on that web page. It might be how you made it to this event today. All of our Fixin to Cook with the Fix-It Fair are listed on there.
And that might look a little different for different browsers, just so you know.
Okay. And then Fixin to Cook, last year we did winter vegetables. So there's an archive of winter recipes from last year when we participated in the same cooking lessons. And this year we're excited. So next up is Fixin to Cook sauces, as I mentioned, and it's really just very, very flexible sauces that you might put on a sheet pan of roasted vegetables. It's the time of year where we've got lots of root vegetables in the market that are great to be roasted. And so you'll see some recipes next week for homemade sauces to put on top of your roasted root veggies. And then we're extending into spring. This year, we've got an April 7th lesson coming up. So we're going to be talking about early spring greens that show up at the farmer's market. And that's like dandelion greens and stinging nettles, just those more unusual spring greens that you might not be familiar with, but they're like the early first signs of what's coming as far as fresh greens go. So we've still got 2 more of these.
Hey, Heather, can I share a little bit of personal experience? Someone asked about the fresh bay leaf, and little known factoid about me, long time ago. I worked for about 6 or 7 years in herbal medicine, especially shops and sales. And a lot of these, we actually would sell to a lot of restaurants. And one of the shops I worked at was in the Bay Area. So we sold to like Alice Waters and some pretty high profile places too. A lot of herbs you actually want dried. It breaks down the vegetable cellulose and it brings out the pungent oils and other chemicals that actually lend the flavor. So I'm not quite sure if bay leaf is exactly that way, but that was something that we understood to be true back then. And I think that Heather may have frozen and dropped off. So I'm gonna give Heather just a moment to see if she can come back on, rejoin us. Let's just give Heather another moment to see. There we go. And you're muted.
That was totally me. I'm very sorry. I missed your wonderful story of what you wanted to share.
That's okay. It'll be on the recording. And it was for the good of the room. And you and I will talk more later, and I'll tell you.
Okay, good. I'm glad I made it back to wrap up. I'm sorry, you all.
Very short story. I froze as host on a workshop 2 weeks ago, and then the participant, the teacher, graciously understood what had occurred after a few minutes and closed shop himself. So it's understandable. Well, Heather, thank you so much. Let me check Facebook really quickly. It doesn't look like we have any more questions there. So thank you so much for once again presenting some amazing recipes, really good looking food. I think I've said this in these workshops before, but I actually had to go fix myself something to eat in the middle of it because it looked so good and made me hungry. And thank you all for joining today. I know you take some time out of your day to join us in these, and it's really appreciated. So Heather, thank you. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you so much. We'll see everyone soon.
Absolutely. Bye for now.